The day was perfect, clear skies, a gentle breeze, and families bustling with excitement as they entered the city zoo. In the middle of it all, one figure stood out. Wearing a crisp white button-up shirt, jeans, and a bright red MAGA hat, Elon Musk strolled toward the main entrance. His attire was casual, but the hat caused whispers to ripple through the crowd. "Is that really Elon Musk?" a man murmured to his wife, clutching his camera tightly. "It can't be," she whispered back, though her gaze lingered. Musk, seemingly oblivious to the chatter, continued toward the ticket booth. His expression was one of serene curiosity as he admired the towering giraffes and colorful parrots visible from outside the zoo's gates. He was here for one reason, a promise to his youngest son to visit the zoo during a rare free weekend. But trouble stirred before he could even enter. The zoo's administrator, a stout man with a tightly knotted tie named Mr. Fergus, spotted Musk from the office window. His eyes narrowed at the sight of the red cap. The zoo had strict policies about maintaining a neutral space, and anything political, even hats, was strictly discouraged. By the time Musk approached the gate, Mr. Fergus was already there, flanked by 2 security guards. "Excuse me, sir," Fergus said firmly, his face a mix of nervousness and authority, "we can't allow that hat inside the zoo." Elon tilted his head slightly, his lips curving into a bemused smile. "This hat?" He tapped the brim lightly. "It's just a cap. I assure you I'm here to admire the pandas, not start a debate." Fergus stiffened. "Our policy is clear, sir. Political attire is prohibited. I'll have to ask you to remove it or leave." A hush fell over the nearby crowd, the bystanders now more intrigued than ever. Parents nudged each other, teenagers pulled out phones, and whispers of, "What's going to happen?" filled the air. Musk leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice but maintaining his calm demeanor. "So, the problem isn't me, it's the hat. It doesn't bite, you know." Fergus flushed with embarrassment but stood his ground. "It's about maintaining a welcoming environment for all guests. I'm afraid I must insist." A flicker of annoyance crossed Musk's face, but he took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the crowd. People were recording, waiting for his reaction. He knew that any wrong move could turn this into a media storm. "All right," Musk said finally, removing the hat and holding it in his hands. "But let me ask you this, how far will you go to avoid discomfort? Because, my friend, that's not neutrality, it's suppression." Fergus faltered, taken aback by Musk's words. The crowd stirred, sensing the tension but unsure of what might come next. Suddenly, a small voice broke the standoff. "Daddy, where's the penguin exhibit?" A boy's head popped out from behind Musk, his eyes wide with innocent curiosity. It was Musk's son, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. Musk crouched down, meeting his son's eyes. "We'll get there soon, X," he said gently. Straightening up, he turned back to Fergus. "For now, let's focus on what matters, seeing the animals." As the guards stepped aside, Musk and his son entered the zoo, leaving the crowd buzzing with speculation. But this was only the beginning of a day no one would forget. Inside the zoo, Elon Musk walked alongside his son, who darted between exhibits with uncontainable excitement. The boy marveled at every animal, from the regal lions lounging under the sun to the playful otters splashing in their pond. Musk followed, his mood lifting as he watched his son's joy. But whispers followed them everywhere. Visitors pointed and muttered, some snapping pictures. Others were less subtle. "He thinks he can do whatever he wants," one man grumbled, glaring at Musk. Musk ignored the murmurs until he reached the penguin exhibit. X stood transfixed by the tuxedoed birds waddling and diving into the water. Musk crouched beside him, sharing the moment. That's when a woman approached. "Excuse me, Mr. Musk," she said hesitantly, clutching a notebook. "I don't mean to interrupt, but, is it true they almost kicked you out because of your hat?" Musk smiled faintly but didn't confirm or deny it. I'm here for the penguins, he replied, redirecting her attention to the exhibit. Aren't they incredible? The woman blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of his response. Yes, but... Before she could finish, a commotion erupted nearby. A young boy, no older than 6, had climbed onto the railing of the tiger enclosure, teetering dangerously. His panicked mother screamed, "Somebody help." Musk reacted instantly. He handed his son to a nearby zookeeper and sprinted toward the enclosure. The boy lost his balance and slipped, dangling by one hand. Gasps filled the air as Musk vaulted over the safety barrier. Gripping a support beam, he reached down and grabbed the child just as the tigers stirred below. The crowd erupted into cheers as Musk hoisted the boy back to safety. The mother pulled her son into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you so much." Musk nodded, breathing heavily. "Just glad he's okay." As he climbed back over the barrier, a hush fell over the crowd. Even the most skeptical onlookers seemed to reconsider their opinions. The man who had grumbled earlier stepped forward, extending a hand. "I judged you too quickly," he admitted. "That was incredible." Musk accepted the handshake, his grip firm but brief. "We all make snap judgments," he said. "It's what we do next that matters." As he walked back to the penguin exhibit, the atmosphere had shifted. The whispers were no longer of criticism but admiration. Yet Musk barely acknowledged it. His focus remained on his son, who was now chatting animatedly with a zookeeper about penguin diets. Unbeknownst to Musk, Mr. Fergus had been watching the entire scene from a distance, his face pale and his lips pressed into a thin line. Muttering to himself, he turned on his heel and stormed toward the zoo office, his mind racing. Something had to be done. Back at the penguin exhibit, Elon Musk leaned against the railing, his son's chatter a soothing backdrop to the adrenaline still coursing through him. The crowd around him had thinned, though a few people lingered, stealing glances at him as they passed. One of the zookeepers approached, a woman named Elena with kind eyes and a clipboard tucked under her arm. "Mr. Musk, I just wanted to say thank you. That boy could have been seriously hurt." Musk shrugged, brushing off the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." Elena smiled wryly. "I'm not sure about that. Some people freeze in situations like that. You didn't." She hesitated, then added, "By the way, I know Mr. Fergus has been a bit difficult. He can be very strict about rules, but not everyone here agrees with his approach." Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued but non-committal. "It's his zoo. He runs it as he sees fit." Elena looked like she wanted to say more but stopped herself, her eyes darting to a group of zookeepers nearby. "Anyway, enjoy the rest of your visit," she said quickly before walking away. Just as Musk turned back to the penguins, a booming voice echoed through the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, please gather at the Central Plaza for a special announcement." Musk frowned. His son tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we go see?" "Sure," Musk said, taking X's hand as they followed the crowd toward the plaza. When they arrived, Mr. Fergus stood on a small stage, flanked by zoo employees. His face was flushed, and he gripped the microphone with white-knuckled determination. Musk instantly sensed trouble. "Thank you all for coming," Fergus began, his voice straining to sound cheerful. "We're thrilled to have so many of you here today. But I must remind everyone that our zoo policies are in place to ensure a welcoming environment for all guests." He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd until it landed on Musk. "Unfortunately, earlier today, there was an incident involving one of our guests who chose to disregard our rules." The murmurs began immediately. Musk remained still, his expression unreadable. Fergus continued, his voice rising. "While we respect freedom of expression, this is a family space, and we will not tolerate any actions that disrupt the comfort and safety of our visitors. I ask that all guests remember to adhere to our guidelines, or they may be asked to leave." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, shifting from curiosity to outrage as Fergus's implications sank in. Someone shouted, "He just saved a kid's life. How is that disruptive?" Another voice chimed in, "This is ridiculous." Fergus ignored the backlash, his jaw tightening as he signaled for security to step forward. The guards hesitated, clearly uneasy with the hostile atmosphere. Then Musk stepped forward. He climbed onto the stage with a calm that belied the tension crackling in the air. Taking the microphone from Fergus, he faced the crowd. "Let's not let this get out of hand," he began, his voice steady. "I didn't come here to make a statement or cause trouble. I came here to spend time with my son." The crowd quieted, hanging on his every word. "But," Musk continued, his tone sharpening, "since we're addressing comfort and safety, let's talk about what really makes people uncomfortable. Is it a hat? Or is it our tendency to focus on differences instead of what brings us together?" Fergus bristled, but Musk didn't give him a chance to interrupt. "This zoo isn't about politics or policies. It's about the animals and the families who come here to connect with them. That's why I'm here. That's why we're all here." The crowd erupted into cheers, their support washing over Musk like a wave. Fergus, meanwhile, looked as though he'd swallowed a lemon. But Musk wasn't done. He turned to Fergus and handed him the microphone. "The stage is yours, Mr. Fergus. But before you speak, consider this: sometimes, the rules we enforce say more about us than those who break them." With that, Musk stepped down, taking his son's hand and walking away. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, their applause following him as he disappeared into the throng. Fergus stood frozen on the stage, the microphone slipping from his hand. And somewhere in the crowd, Elena smiled. The zoo buzzed with electricity after Elon Musk's impromptu speech. As he and his son walked away from the central plaza, people whispered and pointed, their earlier doubts replaced by admiration. Musk kept his focus on X, who was now tugging him toward the reptile house. "Daddy, I want to see the big snake," X exclaimed, his excitement cutting through the lingering tension. "All right, let's go see the big snake," Musk said, smiling. But even as he tried to focus on his son's enthusiasm, his mind replayed the encounter with Mr. Fergus. There was something deeper behind the man's hostility, Musk suspected, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Inside the reptile house, the air was cool and dim, the glass enclosures glowing softly under overhead lights. X pressed his face to the glass, marveling at the enormous Burmese python coiled lazily on a branch. Musk crouched beside him, explaining how snakes move without legs and how they sense heat with their tongues. Suddenly, a soft voice interrupted them. "Excuse me, Mr. Musk." Musk turned to see Elena, the zookeeper he'd spoken to earlier. She glanced nervously over her shoulder before stepping closer. "I need to tell you something," she said in a low voice. Musk stood, his expression serious. "What's on your mind?" Elena hesitated, her eyes darting toward X. "It might be better if we talked somewhere private." Musk nodded, his curiosity piqued. "X, stay here and keep watching the snakes, okay? I'll be right back." X nodded, completely absorbed in the python's slow, hypnotic movements. Musk followed Elena to a quiet corner of the exhibit, away from the other visitors. "I don't know how to say this," Elena began, wringing her hands. "But Mr. Fergus, he's been making some questionable decisions lately. Cutting corners, prioritizing appearances over the animal's welfare. And now, with this whole thing about your hat, I think he's trying to cover up something bigger." Musk's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by something bigger?" Elena glanced around again, lowering her voice further. "The zoo's finances are a mess. Fergus has been diverting funds meant for animal care to, well, we're not sure. But the enclosures haven't been updated in years, and some of the animals aren't getting the medical attention they need. Staff have tried to speak up, but Fergus always shuts it down." Musk's mind raced. He had come to the zoo for a quiet day with his son, but this was shaping into something far more serious. "Why tell me this?" he asked. "Surely there are authorities you can report this to." "We've tried," Elena said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But Fergus has connections. He always manages to sweep things under the rug. When I saw how you handled him earlier, I thought, maybe you could help." Musk folded his arms, considering her words. He had no obligation to get involved, yet the thought of animals suffering due to negligence struck a nerve. "All right," he said finally. "I'll look into it." Elena's eyes lit up with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you need proof, some of the staff have been keeping records. I can get them to you." Musk nodded, his resolve hardening. "Do it discreetly. And don't put yourself at risk." As Elena slipped away, Musk returned to his son, who was now enthralled by a brightly colored chameleon. He crouched beside X, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. "Having fun?" Musk asked, masking the turmoil in his thoughts. X nodded, his face glowing with wonder. "This is the best day ever, Daddy." Musk smiled, but his mind was already turning over the new information. The day had taken an unexpected turn, and he had a feeling it was far from over. Elon Musk left the reptile house with his son in tow, his mind buzzing with questions. The accusations against Mr. Fergus were troubling, and if they were true, the implications went far beyond a poorly managed zoo. But Musk also knew that acting rashly could jeopardize not only the animals but also the employees who relied on their jobs. X tugged on his sleeve, pulling him back to the moment. "Daddy, can we go see the elephants now?" "Of course," Musk said, forcing a smile. "Lead the way." As they walked, Musk glanced around, taking in the zoo's facilities with a new perspective. At first glance, everything seemed fine, but now he noticed subtle signs of neglect. Rusting railings, peeling paint on enclosures, and sparse greenery in some habitats hinted at deeper issues. When they reached the elephant exhibit, X gasped in delight. A massive bull elephant with long, curved tusks stood at the center of the enclosure, lazily flapping its ears. Musk watched his son press against the railing, his face alight with wonder. For a moment, the worries faded, replaced by the simple joy of seeing his child happy. But the moment didn't last. A commotion erupted near the elephant habitat. Two zookeepers were arguing heatedly, their raised voices drawing the attention of nearby visitors. Musk moved closer, curiosity overcoming his desire to avoid further drama. "You can't keep ignoring it, Frank," a woman's voice snapped. It was Elena. Frank, a burly man with a tired expression, crossed his arms defensively. "And what do you expect me to do, Elena? March into Fergus's office and demand he fix everything? You know how that'll end. So we just let the animals suffer?" Elena shot back, her face flushed with frustration. "Keep your voices down," Frank hissed, glancing nervously at the gathering crowd. "You're going to get us both fired." Musk stepped forward, his presence immediately silencing the argument. "Is there a problem here?" Frank's eyes widened in recognition, but he quickly looked away. Elena, however, met Musk's gaze with a mixture of relief and determination. "Mr. Musk, this is Frank. He's the head of animal care here. He can confirm what I told you earlier." Frank glared at Elena. "Don't drag me into this." Musk's tone remained calm, but his words carried weight. "Frank, if there's something going on that's putting these animals at risk, I need to know." Frank hesitated, torn between his loyalty to the zoo and his concern for the animals. Finally, he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I don't know all the details. But Fergus has been cutting budgets left and right. We've had to delay repairs on enclosures, skip routine checkups for some of the animals. It's not right, but what can we do?" "You speak up," Musk said simply. "You find people who care and make your voices heard." Frank shook his head. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who'll lose your job. I understand the risk, Musk said. But if this zoo's leadership is failing its animals and its staff, someone needs to step in. The sincerity in Musk's voice seemed to reach Frank. He glanced at Elena, who gave him an encouraging nod. All right, Frank said reluctantly. If you're serious about helping, meet me after closing. There's something you need to see. Musk nodded. I'll be there. As Frank walked away, Elena lingered, her expression uncertain. Do you think he'll follow through? Musk's gaze followed Frank until he disappeared around a corner. We'll find out tonight. Turning back to X, Musk ruffled his son's hair. Ready for the next adventure? X grinned, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around them. Yeah. Can we get ice cream first? Absolutely, Musk said, taking his son's hand. But as they headed to the snack stand, his mind remained fixed on the night ahead and the truths it might reveal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the zoo in a warm, golden glow, the crowds began to thin. Parents herded tired children toward the exit, and the animals retreated to their dens. But Elon Musk lingered, his son by his side, waiting for the opportunity to meet Frank after closing. Daddy, is the zoo closing? X asked, tugging on Musk's hand. Not quite yet, Musk said. But we're going to see something special soon. Satisfied with that answer, X nodded and returned to licking his ice cream cone, completely unaware of the tension simmering around them. As the clock struck 6, a zookeeper approached Musk. It was Elena, dressed in a casual hoodie now instead of her uniform. Frank's waiting for us at the North Service gate, she whispered. Are you ready? Musk nodded. He crouched down to X's level. Buddy, I need you to stay here for a little while, okay? Elena's friends will keep you company, and I'll be back before you know it. X looked hesitant but nodded. Promise? Promise, Musk said, giving him a reassuring hug. He turned to Elena, who gestured toward a small group of staff gathered nearby. One of them, a young woman with a kind smile, stepped forward to take X's hand. Musk watched until his son was safely with the group, then followed Elena toward the service gate. When they arrived, Frank was waiting, his face shadowed with unease. This way, he muttered, leading them down a narrow path flanked by storage buildings and maintenance equipment. The path ended at a large, weathered barn. Frank unlocked the barn door, revealing a dimly lit interior filled with cages, medical equipment, and stacks of paperwork. The smell of antiseptic mingled with the earthy scent of hay. In one corner, a young lion lay on a cot, its paw heavily bandaged. This is what I wanted to show you, Frank said, gesturing toward the lion. His name's Samson. He got into a fight with another male and hurt his leg. We've been patching him up as best we can, but he should have had surgery weeks ago. Musk stepped closer, his heart sinking at the sight of the injured animal. Why hasn't he been treated? Budget cuts, Frank said grimly. Fergus keeps delaying the procedure, saying it's too expensive. We've been trying to keep him comfortable, but it's not enough. Musk knelt beside the lion, his eyes scanning the makeshift setup. How many other animals are in this situation? Too many, Frank admitted. The vet team is stretched thin, and we don't have the resources we need. It's only going to get worse unless something changes. Musk stood, his mind racing. He turned to Elena. You mentioned earlier that some of the staff have been keeping records. Do you have them? Elena nodded, pulling a folder from her bag. Everything we've documented is in here, budget discrepancies, maintenance delays, even complaints from visitors that were ignored. It's all connected. Musk flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening as he read. The evidence was damning, painting a clear picture of negligence and mismanagement. This isn't just a financial issue, he said. It's a matter of ethics and responsibility. Frank shifted uncomfortably. What are you going to do with this information? Musk looked up, his gaze steady. Expose it. But not recklessly. If we're going to take Fergus down, we need to do it in a way that protects the animals and the people who care for them. How? Elena asked, her voice tinged with hope and doubt. Leave that to me, Musk said. I've dealt with worse than Fergus before. As they left the barn, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't the day he had planned, but it was a fight worth taking on, for the animals, for the staff, and for the integrity of the zoo itself. The drive home was unusually quiet. Elon Musk sat in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the wheel tightly as his son dozed in the back, clutching a stuffed penguin he'd won at the gift shop. The evidence Elena had handed over sat in a folder on the passenger seat, its weight almost tangible. Musk's mind churned. He had no personal stake in this zoo, no financial interest or obligation to step in. Yet, something about the situation gnawed at him. It wasn't just the suffering animals or the disillusioned staff, it was the principle. Leaders were entrusted to care for those who depended on them, whether people or animals. And when they failed, it was up to others to step up. As he pulled into the driveway of his home, Musk's thoughts solidified into action. He carried his sleeping son to bed, tucking him in gently, before heading to his study. The folder sat on his desk, surrounded by the quiet hum of electronics and the faint glow of monitors. Time to dig deeper, he muttered, firing up his computer. The next morning, Musk arrived at the zoo just as it opened, his presence sparking a buzz among early visitors and staff. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 associates from his legal team accompanied him, their expressions serious as they carried briefcases and laptops. Elena and Frank were waiting by the main entrance. What's going on? Frank asked, eyeing the lawyers warily. Musk smiled faintly. We're starting the process of cleaning house. He led the group to the zoo's administrative offices, where a surprised receptionist stammered as they walked past. Mr. Fergus, sitting at his desk with a cup of coffee, looked up in shock as Musk entered. What is the meaning of this? Fergus demanded, rising to his feet. Musk's tone was calm but firm. Mr. Fergus, we need to talk. I've reviewed the records, and it's clear there are serious issues under your management. Budget misappropriations, neglected animals, and staff complaints, none of this reflects the values a zoo should stand for. Fergus's face darkened. You have no authority here, Mr. Musk. This is a privately managed zoo, and you're overstepping. Musk stepped closer, his voice low but unyielding. You're right. I have no authority. But I do have resources, connections, and a platform large enough to bring these issues to light. Do you want to test how far this can go? For a moment, Fergus faltered, his bluster deflating. But he quickly rallied, his tone dripping with contempt. You think you can waltz in here and play savior? This zoo has been running fine for years. People like you don't understand what it takes to keep a place like this afloat. Musk nodded toward his lawyers, who stepped forward and placed a thick file on Fergus's desk. This is a formal request for an audit of the zoo's financials and operations. It's already been filed with the relevant authorities. Fergus's face paled. You can't do this. I can, Musk said simply. And I have. The tension in the room was palpable. Fergus's fists clenched at his sides as he glared at Musk, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he sat down heavily, his face a mixture of anger and defeat. As Musk turned to leave, he addressed Elena and Frank. I'll be back later. In the meantime, keep doing what you're doing. Change is coming. The group exited the office, leaving Fergus staring after them, his coffee untouched. Back outside, Elena's expression was a mix of hope and disbelief. Do you really think this will work? Musk smiled. It's already working. Fergus knows his time is running out. The truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, people like him don't stand a chance. Frank clapped Musk on the shoulder. You might actually pull this off. We will, Musk corrected. Together. As they walked away from the offices, the zoo seemed brighter somehow. The animals were still in their enclosures, the challenges still looming, but the weight of hopelessness had begun to lift. For the first time in a long time, change felt possible. The zoo hummed with cautious energy as the day wore on. News of the confrontation between Elon Musk and Mr. Fergus had already begun to spread among the staff, sparking whispered conversations behind enclosures and in break rooms. Visitors sensed the change, too, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as though the zoo itself held its breath. Musk spent the morning with X, making good on his promise to enjoy the day together. They fed giraffes, watched a sea lion show, and even rode the carousel twice. But in the back of Musk's mind, the wheels of his plan were already turning. By early afternoon, Musk slipped away, leaving X in the care of Elena, who had quickly bonded with the boy. He headed to the employee lounge, where Frank waited with a small group of staff members. The atmosphere was tense, the employees' faces a mix of fear and hope. "Thank you all for coming," Musk began, his calm tone settling the room. "I know this is a risk for you, but I need your help to make real change here." A young woman in a zookeeper uniform raised her hand hesitantly. "What can we do?" "Fergus has always found a way to silence anyone who speaks up." Musk nodded. "That's why we're not going to fight him on his terms. The evidence you've gathered is powerful, but we need more. Documentation, witness statements, anything that shows a clear pattern of mismanagement." Another employee, an older man with weathered hands, spoke up. "Even if we do all that, what's to stop him from shutting this place down out of spite?" "That's a risk," Musk admitted. "But I have the resources to step in if it comes to that. The animals, and this zoo, deserve better than what Fergus has given them. Together, we can make that happen." The room fell silent as the weight of Musk's words sank in. Finally, Frank broke the tension. "All right," he said. "You've got our support. Let's do this." Musk smiled, a spark of determination in his eyes. "Thank you. Let's get to work." By the end of the day, Musk had a growing stack of evidence, photos of neglected enclosures, records of delayed medical treatments, and testimonials from staff members. He worked methodically, coordinating with his legal team and ensuring every detail was documented. Meanwhile, word of Musk's involvement spread beyond the zoo. Visitors posted videos of his earlier speech online, and the story began to gain traction on social media. By evening, hashtags like #ZooChange and #MuskForAnimals were trending, drawing attention from news outlets and animal rights organizations. Fergus, holed up in his office, watched the coverage with growing dread. Every new post chipped away at his authority, every comment a reminder that his days were numbered. He slammed his laptop shut and poured himself a stiff drink, his mind racing with desperate schemes to regain control. But Musk was already 3 steps ahead. As night fell, Musk stood by the lion enclosure, watching Samson limp across the grass. Elena joined him, her face tired but hopeful. "Do you think we're making a difference?" she asked softly. Musk didn't hesitate. "We are. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with people who care enough to try." Elena smiled. "Thank you for believing in us, and in this zoo. I don't think anyone else would have gone this far." Musk turned to her, his expression serious. "The world doesn't change because of one person. It changes because of many people working together. And this is just the beginning." As they walked back toward the entrance, the distant roars and chirps of the animals filled the cool night air. The zoo, once a place of quiet despair, now held the promise of a brighter future. The next morning, the zoo awoke to a media frenzy. News trucks lined the parking lot and reporters swarmed the entrance, eager for a glimpse of Elon Musk. Overnight, the story of his clash with Mr. Fergus had gone viral, and now everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Musk arrived early, dressed casually and accompanied by his legal team. As he stepped out of his car, a wall of cameras and microphones greeted him. "Mr. Musk, are you planning to take over the zoo?" one reporter shouted. "Do you think Mr. Fergus will resign?" asked another. Musk raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Good morning," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "I understand there's been a lot of interest in what's happening here, so let me clarify, I'm not here to take over the zoo. I'm here to ensure it operates with integrity, for the animals, the staff, and the visitors who love this place." The reporters erupted with more questions, but Musk waved them off. "I'll answer your questions later. Right now, I have work to do." He walked past the crowd, his presence exuding confidence. Behind him, the reporters buzzed with speculation, their cameras capturing every step. Inside the zoo, Musk convened with Elena, Frank, and other key staff members in the employee lounge. They had spent the night compiling their evidence, and now it was time to act. "Everything's ready," Elena said, placing a thick binder on the table. "What's the next step?" Musk glanced at his legal team, who nodded in unison. "We're filing a formal complaint with the local government and animal welfare organizations," he explained. "Once it's filed, it'll trigger an investigation. Fergus won't be able to hide anymore." Frank looked uneasy. "And what if he tries to retaliate?" Musk's gaze was steady. "He won't get the chance. The media spotlight is on this place now, and that gives us leverage. Public opinion can be a powerful tool." The staff exchanged glances, their apprehension slowly giving way to hope. For the first time, they felt like they had a real chance to make a difference. Meanwhile, Mr. Fergus was scrambling to regain control. He called an emergency meeting with the zoo's board of directors, hoping to rally their support. But the board members, many of whom had seen the news coverage, were hesitant. "This isn't just about you, Fergus," one board member said. "The reputation of the entire zoo is at stake. If these allegations are true—" "They're not true," Fergus snapped, though his voice wavered. "It's a smear campaign by an outsider who doesn't understand how we operate." Another board member frowned. "Be that as it may, we can't ignore the evidence. We need to conduct our own investigation." Fergus's face turned red, but he bit back his retort. He knew he was losing their trust, and it terrified him. As the day progressed, Musk continued his quiet campaign. He met with staff, assured visitors that the animals were being cared for, and even took a moment to check on Samson the lion, whose condition had improved slightly under the zookeeper's watchful care. But the real breakthrough came in the afternoon. A courier arrived at the zoo with a sealed envelope addressed to Musk. Inside was an anonymous letter from a former zoo employee, detailing years of mismanagement under Fergus's leadership. The letter included financial records, emails, and even photographs, proof that Fergus had been siphoning funds into his personal accounts. Musk read the letter carefully, his jaw tightening. "This changes everything," he murmured. He handed the evidence to his legal team, who immediately began drafting a press statement. By evening, the story had spread like wildfire. News outlets published the damning details, and #JusticeForTheZoo trended worldwide. That night, Musk stood at the edge of the lion enclosure, watching as Samson dozed peacefully under the moonlight. Elena joined him, her face lit with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Musk corrected. "And it's not over yet. But this is a good start." As they stood together, the sounds of the zoo surrounded them, a symphony of hope and renewal. For the first time in years, the future felt bright. The next morning, the zoo was the center of a media storm. The explosive evidence of Mr. Fergus's misconduct had spread across news outlets and social media, turning public opinion against him. Visitors arrived in droves, not just to see the animals but to witness history in the making. Musk arrived early, greeted by cheers and applause from the crowd gathered at the entrance. He nodded politely but didn't linger. Today was about action, not celebration. Inside the administrative offices, the atmosphere was tense. Mr. Fergus sat in his chair, surrounded by members of the board, his face pale and his demeanor defensive. One of the board members, an older woman named Margaret, addressed him sternly. "Fergus, the evidence against you is overwhelming. We've received multiple complaints from staff, former employees, and even visitors. This board cannot, in good conscience, allow you to remain in your position." Fergus slammed his fist on the table. "This is a witch hunt. That man, Musk, he's orchestrated this whole thing to destroy me." Margaret didn't flinch. "Mr. Musk didn't falsify the financial records. He didn't neglect the animals or ignore staff concerns. Those are your choices, Fergus." Before Fergus could respond, the door opened, and Musk stepped inside. The room fell silent as he approached the table, his expression calm but resolute. "Good morning," Musk said, his voice steady. "I understand this is a difficult conversation, but it's a necessary one. The zoo deserves better leadership that puts the animals, staff, and visitors first." Fergus glared at Musk, his face contorted with anger. "You have no right to interfere here." Musk met his gaze evenly. "I'm not here to interfere. I'm here to ensure this place has a future. And that future doesn't include you." The board exchanged glances, their decision already made. Margaret turned to Fergus. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as zoo administrator. Security will escort you off the premises." Fergus stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He pointed a finger at Musk. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Musk didn't respond, his calm demeanor unwavering. As Fergus stormed out, the tension in the room lifted, replaced by a sense of relief. Margaret turned to Musk. "Thank you for your efforts. The board will appoint an interim administrator while we search for a permanent replacement. Your involvement has brought hope back to this place." Musk nodded. "Thank you. I'll continue to support the zoo however I can." Later that day, Musk met with the staff in the employee lounge. The room was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation. Musk stood at the front, addressing the group. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for this zoo," he said. "But change doesn't happen overnight. It takes all of us working together to make this place the sanctuary it's meant to be, for the animals and the people who care for them." The room erupted into applause, the staff's faces alight with hope. Elena and Frank exchanged a smile, their faith in the zoo's future renewed. As Musk left the meeting, he spotted X playing near the penguin exhibit, laughing with a group of children. The sight brought a smile to his face. This was why he had fought so hard, not just for the zoo but for moments like this, where joy and wonder could thrive. That night, as the zoo settled into its usual rhythm, Musk stood by Samson's enclosure, watching the lion rest peacefully. Elena joined him, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've given us a chance to fix this place, to make it what it was always meant to be." Musk nodded, his gaze steady. "The real work starts now. But I know you're up for it." As they stood together, the sounds of the zoo filled the night air, a symphony of renewal and hope. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt winnable. The next day brought a flurry of activity to the zoo. With Mr. Fergus gone, the staff worked together to address the most pressing issues. Enclosures were cleaned and repaired, schedules were rearranged to ensure every animal received proper care, and a palpable sense of camaraderie replaced the fear that had gripped the team under Fergus's rule. Musk spent the morning walking the grounds with Elena and Frank. The trio discussed long-term plans for the zoo, from fundraising initiatives to educational programs that would engage the community. "We've already had offers from donors," Elena said, scrolling through her phone. "A local tech company reached out this morning, and a wildlife foundation wants to partner with us." "That's a great start," Musk said. "But let's make sure we're transparent about how the funds are used. Donors want to see results, and so does the public." Frank nodded. We'll need to bring in experts to help with the animals that have been neglected. And the staff could use some extra hands. Musk smiled. Consider it done. I'll connect you with people who can help. In the meantime, let's focus on getting this place back on its feet. In the afternoon, Musk took a break to spend time with X, who was eager to explore the zoo again. They visited the aviary, where brightly colored birds flitted among the trees, and the primate house, where a baby orangutan delighted X with its playful antics. As they watched the orangutan swing from branch to branch, a woman approached them, holding a small child by the hand. "Mr. Musk," she said hesitantly. "I just wanted to thank you for what you've done. My family comes here every month, and it's such a special place for us. Knowing it's in good hands now means the world." Musk crouched down to greet the child, who clutched a stuffed giraffe tightly. "I'm glad you enjoy the zoo," he said. "We're going to make it even better." The woman smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You've inspired a lot of people, including me. Thank you." As the woman walked away, Musk felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had stepped into this situation unexpectedly, but seeing the impact of his efforts made every challenge worthwhile. That evening, the zoo hosted a community forum, inviting visitors and supporters to share their ideas and concerns. The turnout was overwhelming, with hundreds of people filling the outdoor amphitheater. Musk took the stage, greeted by a standing ovation. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice carrying across the crowd. "This zoo is more than a collection of animals and enclosures. It's a place where people come to connect, with nature, with each other, and with something bigger than themselves. That's why it matters." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're committed to rebuilding this zoo, not just physically but as a symbol of what we can achieve when we work together. Your support is what makes that possible." The crowd erupted into applause, their enthusiasm a testament to the growing momentum behind the zoo's transformation. Later that night, as Musk walked through the quiet zoo, he reflected on the journey so far. The challenges had been immense, but so were the rewards. He had seen people rise to the occasion, united by a shared purpose. And in the process, he had rediscovered his own belief in the power of community. As he passed Samson's enclosure, the lion lifted his head, his golden eyes meeting Musk's. It was a moment of quiet connection, a reminder of why Musk had fought so hard. The road ahead was long, but Musk was ready for the journey. With the support of the staff, the community, and countless others who believed in the zoo's mission, the future looked brighter than ever. It was a month later, and the zoo had undergone a transformation. The enclosures gleamed with fresh paint, lush greenery filled once bare habitats, and the animals were thriving under the care of a reinvigorated staff. The community had rallied behind the zoo, with volunteers pitching in and donations flooding from around the world. The turnaround was nothing short of miraculous. To celebrate, the zoo hosted a grand reopening event, with free admission for all visitors. Families streamed through the gates, children's laughter mingling with the calls of exotic birds and the playful roars of the big cats. The atmosphere was electric, a far cry from the tense and somber days under Fergus's rule. Elon Musk stood near the entrance, watching the crowds with a quiet sense of accomplishment. His son, X, held his hand, a balloon in the other. "This is amazing, Daddy," X said, his eyes sparkling. "Can we come here every weekend?" Musk chuckled. "Maybe not every weekend, but we'll definitely visit often." Just then, Elena and Frank approached, their faces beaming with pride. "You've got to see this," Elena said, leading Musk and X to the central plaza. The space had been transformed into a vibrant hub, complete with an interactive exhibit where kids could learn about wildlife conservation. But the highlight of the plaza was the new statue, a life-sized bronze lion with an inscription at its base, "To those who fight for the voiceless, may their courage inspire us all." Musk stood before the statue, his chest tightening with emotion. It wasn't just a tribute to the zoo's journey but a reminder of the power of collective action. "That's Samson, isn't it?" X asked, pointing to the lion's likeness. It sure is, Musk said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. And he's a symbol of everything we've worked for. As Musk admired the statue, a zookeeper approached with a microphone. Mr. Musk, would you say a few words? The crowd, sensing the moment, began to gather, their excitement palpable. Musk took the microphone, his voice steady but warm. Thank you all for being here, he began. This zoo is proof of what can happen when people come together. It's not about one person or one action, it's about a shared commitment to something greater than ourselves. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Today, this zoo isn't just a home for animals. It's a beacon of hope, a place where we can learn, grow, and be reminded of our connection to the natural world. That's something worth fighting for. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the plaza. Musk handed the microphone back and crouched to meet his son's eyes. Did I do okay? Musk asked, smiling. X grinned. You were awesome, Daddy. As the event continued, Musk wandered the zoo, taking in the joy and wonder on people's faces. Everywhere he looked, there were signs of renewal, happy children, engaged staff, and animals that seemed to radiate health and vitality. At the end of the day, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Musk stood at the lion enclosure one last time. Samson lay beneath a tree, his golden mane glowing in the evening light. For a moment, their eyes met, and Musk felt a deep sense of peace. Elena joined him, a soft smile on her face. Thank you, Elon. For everything. Musk nodded. Thank you, for believing that things could change. As he and X made their way to the exit, Musk turned back for one last look at the zoo. It was more than he'd ever expected when he walked in wearing that red hat. It was a story of hope, courage, and the extraordinary things that happen when people refuse to give up. The gates closed behind them, but the legacy of that day, and the fight that had led to it, would live on. And somewhere, in the heart of the zoo, a lion roared, his voice carrying the promise of a brighter tomorrow.